Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars. Open up the
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking. I'm your host, SHERI Horn Hasan, and I'm coming to you today on December 16th of 2021 from Contact Talk Radio. Just a quick reminder that this show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. So before I launch into this week's Astro News you can use, I'm going to recite my usual housekeeping stuff, which is to tell you that you can listen to Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking, anytime by simply going to my website at karmicevolution.com and clicking on the upper right-hand portion of the banner labeled Radio Show. From there, you can scroll down the page, hear the most recent show, either live or recorded, and or search the archive listings for past shows that you might have missed or that you want to listen to again. Separately, I'd be thrilled if you would follow me on my Facebook page, Karmic Evolution for Your Soul, where you can also sign up for my newsletter, Conversations About Consciousness. And finally, I'm offering still to radio listeners only or podcast listeners only my 1-hour discounted Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for only $99. So, do you want to gain greater consciousness about your soul's true mission and purpose in this lifetime? Move from chaos to clarity in your relationships, career, finances, health, or other areas of importance to you? Heal old karmic wounds and co-create your own future happiness and success? Awaken to your true potential and highest destiny in this lifetime? Well, that's easy when you take advantage of my special discounted offer for listeners. Again, a 1-hour Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for only $99. These also make wonderful gifts, and I do have gift certificates I can email people. So if you'd like to purchase one for a family member, a friend, a significant other, a child, etc., a colleague, by all means, simply email me at SHERI, that's SHERI, at karmicevolution.com, and we'll get your reading booked today. At almost half the regular price, conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable. Okay, so let's get into this week's Astro News you can use. The big news this week is that we're waxing toward the Gemini Full Moon, which occurs at 27 degrees and 29 minutes of the Gemini Sagittarius polarity at 8:36 p.m. Pacific time and 11:36 p.m. Eastern time on December 18th. So the Gemini moon asks the Sagittarius sun to release any preconceived notions, beliefs, and philosophies so that we can create space into which we can incorporate into these older philosophical mindsets new, more currently available information. The problem at this lunation, however, will be that the Gemini moon exact squares Neptune in Pisces about 14 hours before she waxes into her exact opposition to the Sag sun. And this aspect can play out in one of two ways, or in one of two extremes, or anything in between. It either reveals with starker clarity that what we formerly believed to be gospel was based on false information, read dis or misinformation, or it can lead us to take a higher path and rise above the din and noise to hear our higher self and her soul's true beliefs, regardless of what's going on externally within the collective. Now, the moon square to Neptune, excuse me, I'm just going to take a quick drink. My throat's a little froggy. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. Anyway, the moon square to Neptune can put us into a kind of dreamy state during which our more rational thoughts become distorted or in some way lead us toward more fantastical thinking about what is real and what is not. As Shakespeare said in The Tempest, and this is one of my favorite Shakespearean quotes, nothing is but what is not. And this in turn can create what Rob Hand in his transit delineation book, Planets in Transit, describes as a time when subconscious influences become very strong and, quote, old points of view, habits picked up in childhood, and prejudices can mislead us now. There's a way out, however, and that's by taking the higher road I mentioned before, and that's to use this lunation square Neptune as we get to the exact lunation as a good time to meditate in order to cut through the fog and confusion about what's true and what is not, at least as far as our soul is concerned, and for us to hear the voice of our higher self through all of that outer noise and confusion. Now, this particular lunation echoes the message of the transiting karmic nodes for the past 18 months as they're about to shift from Sagittarius South Node and Gemini North Node into a Scorpio South Node and Taurus North Node next month. If we follow the true nodes, I don't have the exact date. I think it's January 20th. The me nodes will shift earlier before the end of this month, but let's go with the true nodes for now. And that concerns current collective energies surrounding any kind of righteous thinking, meaning the portion of the collective that believes it knows, quote unquote, the truth, but refuses to acknowledge more recent facts that might change or modify this philosophical or ideological truth. So we know that Sagittarius represents higher education, law, foreign travel, and religion. So it's easy to see how these issues have been a large part of society's concern over the past year and a half, right? And combined with the Saturn in Aquarius square to Uranus and Taurus, which perfects 3 times in 2021, with the last one of the year coming up on December 24th. Actually, hold on a second. I'm not sure if that's the 24th or the 23rd. No, it is, I think. Let me just double check. I write these things down, I check them, and then I get suddenly get a little, paranoid that I might be telling you that. Yeah, it actually perfects on the West Coast at 11:17 p.m. on December 23rd, and early on Friday, December 24th, on the East Coast at 2:17 a.m. So this is the night and the early morning before the day of Christmas Eve, right? And the day before Christmas. So it's kind of interesting to note that, right? So this Saturn-Uranus square has clearly manifested as restrictions caused, in the outer world, primarily starting with the current pandemic from early 2020. And the transiting Sagittarius South Node and Gemini North Node seems to have resulted in a lot of folks thinking that they know what is the absolute truth and who refuse to listen to any other point of view. So restrictions resulting in the realms of Sagittarius ruled things or Jupiter ruled things like travel, education, and we know that elementary education from kindergarten up or even preschool up through the end of high school lies within Gemini's domain, while higher education, college and above, fall under Jupiter-ruled Sagittarius. and through restrictive state laws, many of which are being challenged in the courts as we speak. I'll mention also, I mean, it's been in the news I saw it either yesterday or the day before, major universities, and the story I saw was about Princeton University in New Jersey, which has gone virtual, and they're rethinking as we end this year whether or not they're going to come back to live classes. I know that my son, who's at Georgetown Law right now, has been virtual since the period of finals starting, which is about 2 weeks ago. They didn't say it was in connection with the pandemic, but I'm assuming they probably didn't really have to. They just probably made that decision because it was easier all the way around anyway. And since now, as I understand it, at least from my son, I don't know about anybody else with kids in college, or grad school, but the exams are virtual too. So you no longer have to go to a classroom or an auditorium and take the exam. You just do it on your computer, right? So it's interesting. But anyway, part and parcel of Uranus and Taurus and the changes that we've made in terms of technology and stuff like that. But back to the lunation and the nodes, we've seen also rebellions against restrictions. Well, back to the Saturn-Uranus square, right? Like vaccine mandates argued against by religious groups and on religious grounds that exemptions should be given to what's really tantamount to true believers, right? If I truly believe in my religion and I tell you it's against my religion to adhere to a mask mandate or a vaccine mandate, then I'm asking you to make an exception in my case because I'm one of the chosen ones, right? I mean, it's ironic when you think about it, right? Because everybody is a chosen one if we follow divine law, right? Anyway, arguments about school closures and, like I said, virtual versus live teaching, never mind mask mandates in school, and ongoing discussions concerning working from home versus going into an office every day and more. And we've discussed a lot of that stuff on this show, and and I've aligned it with the Saturn-Uranus square. So as we approach this Gemini full moon, we might think about the negative aspects of the Sagittarius archetype, because the moon reflects the sun's light back to itself, and at a full moon, so the new moon, we plant all of the things that are positive about that archetype, as we did at the Sagittarius new moon solar eclipse 2 weeks ago, and now the Gemini moon reflects the light of the sun back to itself in order to show it its shadow side. What is that shadow side? Arrogance, what the Greeks called hubris, an inflated sense of righteousness, being, as I said, one of the chosen people, especially in terms of religion. But you can also apply that to any being a member of any group that one hails from, whether it's religious or otherwise. And that the Gemini moon calls the Sag sun to let a little Geminian light in to illuminate the room. So the more righteous we become, or we've become, the more we set ourselves up for a fall from grace. It happens to all Greek tragic heroes who fly too high next to the sun, literally or metaphorically, which melts their wings and causes them to plunge to their death in the sea below. In short, pontificating from the mountaintop doesn't cut it. Listening to new ideas that might change some of that pontification does, right? I mean, remember, again, Gemini Sag polarity, 3rd house, 9th house, early elementary education versus higher concepts, right? And those who get up in front of the classroom, depending on your opinion of them, right, might be prone to pontificating. So that's why I'm using that word. But when you're pontificating, is not quite the same as teaching necessarily. So in this era of great polarization, which I don't think anyone with eyes or ears can deny, which is pretty much a direct reflection of the tension between Saturn and Aquarius, which is the groups, Aquarius, of resistors. Saturn likes things to remain with the status quo, stay with the past, keep to tradition. And Uranus in Taurus, groups of progressives who adhere to a new, different, and changed set of values for the future. We've seen this play out in the streets, not only in places like the US and state capitals nationwide, but also in Europe and other countries around the world. So resistance to vaccines, mandate or no mandate, resistance to masks in schools and other places, resistance to laws restricting abortion, resistance to passing voting rights legislation or to restrictive voting rights legislation that has been passed, resistance to finding out the truth about this January 6th attack on the US Capitol, and more will continue into 2022 because this Saturn-Uranus square actually, it's having the third, as I said, exact perfection on the 23rd, 24th of December, but it still remains in orb for a good portion of 2022. I'm going to talk more about that next week when I think I'll probably lay out some of the year ahead, the first part of the year ahead. But touching on it here is important because this energy is obviously coming to exact again. And the first one was in February, the next one was in June, and now we have this one in December. But I'll go into some detail about how the Uranus and Saturn square will come again within a degree of exact at certain periods during 2022, one of which is the fall. So it is not done, my friends. The chaos and the resistance, the protests and all that kind of stuff are not done. And it will remain to be seen what happens when the nodes shift back from a south node in Sagittarius to a south node in Scorpio, and from a north node in Gemini to a north node in Taurus. Now, I'm going to get into that in a little bit as well, at least peripherally. But for now, as we approach the Gemini full moon, we may all think about what are our personal beliefs and where may they be out of step with, one, the changing times, and two, our changing values. And how can we release old philosophies and beliefs that are no longer relevant to our current life and let in new ideas and concepts that are more conducive to our future survival as a more integrated society rather than an excessively polarized one? There is going to come a day when this square's energies are going to pass, right? They're triggering all this now. And there will be repercussions from that probably for decades to come. But what those are still remain to be seen. And again, as I said, we're in the thick of it now. So meanwhile, during this lunation, the Gemini moon trines and the Sag sun sextiles Jupiter in Aquarius. And that tells us this mission, right, to let in new information and to figure out, how we can change our philosophies to be more in alignment with both the changing times, which of course results in a change in values, that we can, it might not be as hard as we think. And that's especially true because Venus is stationing retrograde in Capricorn on December 19th, which calls us to go deep about what we truly value in both relationships and in work, or I might say in our relationship to work. So during this period from December 19th until January 29th of 2022, when Venus moves from 26 degrees and 29 minutes to 11 degrees and 5 minutes of Capricorn, we might ask ourselves, how can we go deeper to bring into greater consciousness what our soul truly values, and how can we build healthier and happier relationships based on a greater sense of inner security about that which we truly value? And this becomes important, especially as we approach the Saturn-Uranus square on the 23rd, 24th, and this polarization around us continues. It becomes of paramount importance now because we don't want the outer polarization of the collective, the energy of the chaos, the energy of protest, the energy of, I know, I believe this and I'm right and you're wrong, so go to hell, and the taking of actions around that, right? You know, I'm talking about violence or threats of violence or things like that. You know, if you don't believe what I believe, I'm going to kill you, essentially, right? Or I'm just going to cut you out of my life if we're talking about relationships. You know, we've all lived through Thanksgiving, so everybody has their own story about whether or not that was a polarizing event within the family or with friends, etc. So we can think about that. But we don't want, as I was saying, the outer conflict, the outer polarization, the outer discord and chaos to infiltrate and upset our inner sense of calm, serenity, and of commitment to our true values. Because, you know, if not, how do we have a relationship outside of ourselves if we don't have a positive, healthy relationship with our inner self first? And that means if we know where we stand in terms of what we truly value, and we make a commitment to ourselves that will only manifest relationships that reflect those things back to us, right? Because if we grasp the concept that it's our inner energies that manifest the people and the circumstances in the world around us, then we understand that a greater sense of inner security and that we are our own best authority, these are Capricorn things, will reflect back to us in the form of others who we draw to us, because inner energy attracts or manifests outer energy. So Venus will once again conjoin in Capricorn, conjoin Pluto in Capricorn on December 25th. So remember the last square of Saturn Uranus, December 23rd, 24th, in the early 23rd, late 23rd, early 24th in the early hours. And then a day and a half later, we have the Venus-Pluto conjunction, which is her second conjunction with Pluto since December 11th. Now, since the third conjunction won't occur until March 3rd of 2022, we're in for the long haul in terms of working on developing how, if we attract to us healthy, committed relationships, or how, you know, we want to develop a more conscious awareness that if we attract to us healthy, committed relationships, then we've done the inner work. But if we don't, there's more inner work that needs to be done to make this happen. In addition, the Venus-Pluto conjunction of December 11th has clearly led to the revealing of a lot of hidden information, hidden secrets. Then remember, Pluto is about what's hidden underneath the surface. It's the underworld. It's the shadow side, as I said. So bringing up the shadow side of Venusian topics, money, sexuality or sexual liaisons or sexual arrangements, sex trafficking. I talked a few weeks ago about the Ghislaine. I found out it's Ghislaine Maxwell trial, right? I haven't seen anything recently, but a few days ago, I think the prosecution rested and they were waiting for the defense. They probably already started, unless they broke for the holidays already. I don't know, but these are things in the news, right? You know, information that's come out, especially about who said what to who and why and when. And part of that is because, as I noted last week, Mars is now in Sagittarius and Mercury's in Capricorn. So Mars is motivated to find the truth, while Mercury in Capricorn wants to unearth the conscious reality of that truth. Who did what and why did they do it? Anyone following current political events involving the former Congressman and Trump Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, will pretty much automatically get what I mean here. And I'm going to go off on a little tangent because I thought you guys might find this interesting. But Meadows has earned himself the distinction of being the first former congressman in 200 years to be held in contempt of Congress for refusing to show up when subpoenaed for questioning about the January 6th Capitol attack. And to add insult to injury, on the day he skipped out on the House January 6th committee as a no-show, Meadows published a book in which he gave the answers to some of the questions the committee was clearly going to ask him. Now, I took a look at Meadows' chart because that started to kind of fascinate me, right? He did this and then he did that. And he said he'd cooperate. He produced documents. Then he said, no, I won't cooperate. Then he publishes a book. Then he files a lawsuit against Nancy Pelosi and the committee. Then, it's a little, for those of you who know any Yiddish, it's a little mashugana, which is a little cuckoo, a little crazy, right? So I took a look at his chart. And although we have no birth time for him, Meadows was born July 18th, 1959 in Verdun, France, and I believe it's spelled Verdun. So this makes him a 4-degree, 37-minute Leo sun with a Uranus-Mercury conjunction with Uranus at 15 and Mercury at 18 Leo. But what's most interesting here is that when you run this chart for noon, which is what I always do in order to pin down the moon at midday, which is something that Ken Negus, who is the head of the Astrological Society of Princeton, who I studied with years and years ago, taught us. If you're going to try to rectify a chart, you run a noon chart that puts the sun on the midheaven, and it gives you the exact position of the moon at midday. And since the moon travels 1 degree every 2 hours, in a 24-hour period, it's only going to travel 12 degrees. And this helps you determine whether the moon is in the same sign during that 24-hour period, right? So when you run his chart for noon, he comes out with a 14-degree, 1-minute Taurus moon. Now, I also run the whole gamut. So if he was born at 12:01 a.m. on July 28th, 59, and 11:59 p.m. that day, his moon falls somewhere between 8 degrees and 5 minutes and 19 degrees and 55 minutes of Taurus. Hence, this tells us with certainty that Meadows has a Taurus moon. It also tells us with pretty much certainty that that moon is within the sights of transiting Uranus, which is currently retrograde at 11 degrees and 16 minutes of Taurus. So it also tells us with certainty that transiting Uranus has already squared Meadows' natal Leo sun a while back. Okay, because Uranus went into Taurus in the spring of 2018. So I didn't look up when it hit 4 or 4.5 degrees, but it is a couple of years ago. So that was presumably when he got involved. I don't know. I didn't look up also the data and the facts on when he took the chief of staff position in the Trump administration, but maybe it was around then when, well, you know what? Now I'm talking so much that, and I don't have my glasses, but hang on, let me just see, because I can give an approximate of when Uranus was at around 4 degrees. La, la, la. 4 degrees. Bear with me. It looks like Uranus first hit 4 degrees, moving forward somewhere around the summer of 2019. Yep, it hit 4 in May of 2019. Yep. Okay, so that gives us an idea. I don't know how long he had the position of chief of staff. I believe it was closer to the end, but that would have been, it might have been then. Anyway, okay, enough. I'll stop mumbling and rambling, and we'll get back to the issue at hand. So we know that Uranus squared his sun already. And in addition, Uranus may or may not have hit his natal moon quite some time ago too, because if it's at 8 degrees of Taurus, it would have been hit already. And if it's at 14, which is the midday, it's being hit like as we speak. So I'm just looking at in addition, Uranus may or may not have hit his natal moon quite a little while ago, but if it's at the middle of Taurus, it would have hit his moon most recently between last July, meaning July 2021, and it's coming back for a more exact hit in April and May of 2022. So what I'm trying to say is that because we don't have an exact birth time, I would watch that time period, April, May of 2022, for any actions concerning recent events that are affecting him now. Now, meanwhile, the Venus-Pluto conjunctions, and we know Venus rules Meadows' Taurus moon, right, have shown us that he communicated on several different telephones, that he didn't use only government servers for his emails. And they showed a clip the other day on the news of him at one of the hearings over Hillary Clinton's not having used the government email server, right, which he apparently didn't do either. And we've seen the release the other day of his texts and those between members of Congress on and leading up to January 6th insurrection. I think the texts go back as far as like the day after the election in November of 2020. So as transiting Uranus progresses after its station direct on January 18 of 2022 at 10 degrees and 49 minutes of Taurus, which happens to be the day after the Cancer full moon on January 17th, it will move on to exact square Meadows' natal Uranus at 1554 Taurus, and then his natal Mercury at 1554 Leo Uranus, and his natal Leo Mercury at 1805. And that will happen in May and June of 2022, respectively. So since Uranus square Uranus is really more of a generational transit, it brings us greater freedom to be who we really are. It's part of the Uranus cycle in our own lives. And it's the closing square. Uranus takes 84 years to go around the chart to come back to its natal position. And he's 3/4 of the way through. So it really is a transit that everyone born with Uranus and Leo is feeling now, because, you know, transiting Uranus is going to square it or has already squared it. And it brings us greater freedom to be who we really are. And by that, we mean individuation as we approach our later years of life around the ages of 60, 62, which, you know, follows our Saturn return at age 59 and a half. And that makes this, like I said, more of a generational transit and not that particularly remarkable given the circumstances that Meadows living through right now. However, having said that, because Uranus is conjoined to Meadows' natal Mercury and squared by the Taurus moon, whatever exact degree it really is natally, they're all being triggered by transiting Uranus now and will continue to be so into the future. So a Uranus-Mercury conjunction can make one prone to quick aha revelatory moments on one hand, but also potentially in receipt of too many thoughts at one time, which can create chaotic thinking. So the triggering of his natal moon, his fixed natal moon in Taurus, square Uranus, Mercury, and Leo, may bring him some rather surprising news, especially in relation to where he lives, since his natal moon squares Mercury, no matter how you slice it, right? So, you know, I mean, I'm not predicting this. I'm not in the habit of predicting, but what I would say is that the significance of the Uranus square Mercury at this point, triggering the moon square Uranus Mercury in his chart, may perhaps change his domestic situation. The moon is about our domestic life, our home. And he may end up incarcerated, because if that's what that change means, right? But it will probably take well into 2022 for any legal cases he's filed to work their way through the court system. So we'll wait and we will see. Now, when I did an elemental modal mix of Meadows' chart, according to Jungian psychological astrologer Richard Idemann's methodology, as outlined in his chart delineation book, The Magic Thread, his dominant function, which is that of which he's most conscious, comes out fixed Earth, which is Taurian. Now, a lot of times the dominant function comes out as the same element and mode of one of the three majors in our chart, the sun, the moon, and or the ascendant, but not always. So here we can see it's moon related for him. Constancy and dependability are part of his energetic makeup. Down to earth, no BS, you know, that kind of thing. Yet, he has no planets in air and only one in a cardinal sign, meaning he's got an inferior function in air and in cardinal energy. Now, inferior function, according to Jungian psychology, doesn't mean worse than. It means that it lies below the dominant function. So if dominant function is a conscious function, then inferior function is part of our unconscious energy. And that means that it breaks through periodically into consciousness. So when a person lacks air, it means that they are capable of losing objectivity. And that's in part because they may suffer from anxiety, panic attacks, some kind of phobia, OCD, any other sort of obsessive thinking, anything that affects us mentally, right? Because air is about communication and the way that the mind works. But it also indicates that, and you know, here I'm talking about Meadows again, he's probably brilliant in some particular limited area. I mean, I surmise perhaps it's in strategizing, because he's an Aries south node and its ruler Mars conjoins Pluto in Virgo. So Aries south node is someone who came in a fighter. Taurus moon is not a fighter, right? So, you know, we already know right away there's some disconnect. And we don't know the house because we don't know the time, so we don't know the ascendant. But Mars, the ruler of the south node, is conjoined with Pluto and Virgo, and that's a pretty intense combination. You know, that's we're not only going to capture them, but we might have to kill them. All right. So Meadows' lack of cardinality, meanwhile, manifests in his Saturn in Capricorn, and that's his only planet in a cardinal sign. And that Saturn in Capricorn happens to square his nodal axis, meaning something about his belief in authority figures, rather than trusting his own inner sense of authority, tripped him up, or as Stephen Forrest would say, vexed him, either early in this lifetime and or in past life karma. And this can manifest, inferior function in cardinal can manifest, according to Eidemann, as, quote, someone who finds beginnings and endings difficult and who may have the sudden urge to begin or end something, a relationship, a job, an investment, for example. So when the cardinal element erupts into consciousness, this person might act suddenly and without warning. Eidemann in his book talks about, for example, you know, being married for 25 years and then suddenly you wake up and there's a note on the kitchen counter that says, I'm sorry, I don't want to be married anymore. I've gone to, you know, I'm in New York, but I'm moving to California. See ya, right? Where it's like, what? So that kind of helps explain, if we also look at Meadows' moon square Uranus Mercury, his chaotic responses to this recent congressional subpoena. Again, first by providing 9,000 pages of documents, including text messages to the January 6th committee, then refusing to show up on his appointed date. As I mentioned before, publishing a book instead that reveals half the information they wanted to get from him in the public domain, and then filing a lawsuit against the committee and the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and now the vote, you know, holding him in contempt. So, you know, we can also see how Meadows' energy mirrors that of Donald Trump's, who's got a Gemini sun conjunct Uranus natally, and both are opposed by his Sag moon. So we need only remember that the 4 years of the Trump administration, of which Meadows, at least towards the end, was a part, to also remember the chaos wrought by Trump's sudden announcements, daily changes, that threw many of us into a tizzy over the course of those years. I mean, that started at the beginning of his term in 2017, when there was the ban on allowing in immigrants from Muslim countries. But then again, not all Muslim countries, just some of them, right? And then he took the ban away, and that was just the beginning. So for my friends who have a long-term memory, it's not difficult to start there and then continue on through the rest of his term with all the different things that he did. Now, in terms of Venus retrograde and her 3 conjunctions to Pluto in Capricorn between December 11th, December 25th, and the final one on March 3rd of 2022, which is a couple of days before she moves into Aquarius on March 6th, we're tasked with facing our shadow side in relationships. The question we want to ask ourselves is, where do we self-sabotage? Where does a less than firm inner sense of security about what we truly value in relationship need to be further strengthened and fortified? The latter is Saturn's Capricorn's job as Venus transits through this sign of foundation building. So if we play our cards right now, we'll pay attention to any inequities in our current relationships. And that means not only with lovers and significant others, but with family, friends, and especially with parents and bosses, since Saturn ruled Capricorn always represents both work and authority figures. Now, I pointed out a few weeks ago that people are leaving their jobs in droves, and even millions more have done so to date. So this is part of that reevaluation about what gives us pleasure in our work, and that if our work is actually pleasurable, then it doesn't feel like work, right? So it's now we might put the pedal to the metal and devote some time to contemplating what about our work we love and what doesn't seem like what we love and doesn't seem like work at all, and what we dislike or even hate. It's time to reevaluate, as so many in the collective have already begun to do. And again, this too is part of the current Saturn-Uranus square energy, because Saturn equals work and Uranus equals change. Let's dig deeply into our psyches during not only the Venus retrograde period, but also during the period of the Venus-Pluto conjunctions, to really discern where we may use controlling behavior, jealousy, or guilt to manipulate others, or where they may be using these same energies to manipulate us. And I would say that's both true on the personal level in the sexual realm, but also in the work, sexual and financial. Okay. But when it comes to work, I mean, having affairs at work or falling in love with your boss or something could be part of that. But, someone using finance as a way to manipulate. Oh, if you do this, then you can have the raise, and that may or may not bleed over into the realm of sexuality. So I'm just saying. The Venus-Pluto conjunction represents an intense energy that can cause us to develop intense infatuations. And again, particularly on the sexual level, for infatuations for others, because they fascinate us. And this allure makes us feel alive at a very deep level. The caution, however, is that such liaisons, having an affair or striking up a relationship with somebody that, begins with the one-night stand or whatever, and I'm not judging that at all, such liaisons generally don't provide the deep sense of inner security or long-term pleasure that we may assume it will at the time we're engaging in it. So if we use the energy of these Venus-Pluto conjunctions appropriately, we might pay attention to the example of Mark Meadows, since I went into some deep discussion about him, and his sycophancy in his support of the former President Trump, and how he sacrificed his true inner sense of values for the mistaken security he thought it might provide him, or it would provide him politically. His attempts to profit from his recently released book, which again contains information he's refused to provide, to the congressional committee, shows us that he really, on a deep inner level, must now reevaluate his connection to a relationship that allowed him to enable a would-be dictator, and how, if he desires to be a truly conscious individual, this was not the right path for him to take in the long term. I don't have high hopes for Mr. Meadows, but on a karmic level, that's, I believe, what he should be looking at. And this leads us back to our own evaluation about how to better achieve balance, equality, and long-term commitment in relationship on a personal level, assuming that's what we're looking for to begin with. So some soul searching is required now to get what we truly desire: harmony, peace, commitment, and serenity that can lead to a more committed state that provides true security for us within our partnerships. Now, I mentioned that on the same day Venus stations retrograde, which is December 19th, that wounded healer Chiron also stations direct in Aries. So when Chiron's in Aries, and this is now a big part of the energy of the collective in an as above, so below fashion, we want to look at where we've been wounded somehow in our ability to be proactive, to follow our natural instincts to survive, and to be able to speak out freely. Again, we go back to the Saturn-Uranus square, groups of resistors, right? Things are finally, I am going to predict something, which is that when the Supreme, and I may have said this last week, but when the Supreme Court comes down in the spring or the early summer of 2022 with its abortion ruling on the Mississippi case that limits abortion to no later than 15 weeks of established verified pregnancy, that women are going to be the protesters. I don't think that anyone, well, no, I'm not saying anyone, but I mean, I don't think the court is taking that into consideration. And I don't think, obviously, the politicians who have passed these restrictive pieces of legislation, because once the Supreme Court comes down with that decision, if they abolish Roe versus Wade, or even if they wound it, I do believe that women are going to come out in droves. So people are starting to do that now. They have been doing it through 2021 as part of this Saturn-Uranus square energy. And again, it will continue. But with Chiron stationing direct, people will be more free. Okay. As Chiron stations direct in Aries, it's time for us to talk about what's wounded us so that we can share our wounds with others. And in doing so, we help them heal. We can already see how many abortion stories have been played up in the press of the negative kind, right? Not, I'm saying that when abortion is prohibited, how it affects women in the most negative senses. The women, the child women who die in forced childbirth and, give birth to children who have problems and all that kind of stuff. We all have our own personal opinions. I'm not espousing any one particular way. I'm just saying that I do think that there is a lot of woundedness around this topic, and that women Roe versus Wade goes back to 1973. How long have women inhabited the earth? When did women get equality under the Constitution? 1920? Or women got the vote? I mean, hello, it's 100 years ago. And the nation is more than, 1.5 times older than that. So 150% older or whatever it is. So anyway, there's a great deal of woundedness inherent in that Venusian archetype and that Chironic archetype. So there may be a lot to think about there. Now, on a personal level, okay, when I talk about the fact that Chiron going direct in Aries allows us to be more open to freely discuss our wounds, it's been my experience, both personally and with clients, that we do heal our own wounds by going out into the world, meeting those with the same or similar wounds, and helping them heal. And the byproduct of that, although it's not necessarily our first intention, is that we heal also. So helping to heal others heals ourselves. Now, the sun joins both Mercury and Venus in Sirius Capricorn when he enters the sign at the winter solstice on December 21st. Of course, this day represents one of the least light in the northern hemisphere and the most light in the southern one. So since Western tropical astrology hails in great measure from the Greeks and Romans, northern hemisphere civilizations, we focus on that most. As the light disappears, the ancient prayed for its return and were rewarded as it began to become visible again about 6 weeks later, which is when we first noticed that the days are getting longer again. And that became the symbol of death and rebirth as part of the resurrection that segued from pagan times into those of religious beliefs. And we must all recommit to our inner sense of security now that the light will indeed return. The Sun, Mercury, and Venus in Capricorn ask us to hold on, and the upcoming Gemini full moon cautions us to believe that which we know to be true, that the light will in fact return. This eliminates fear and replaces it with certainty that we can believe in natural cycles and that they repeat themselves periodically, in this case on an annual cyclical basis, and that if we possess this knowing on both an inner and outer level, we can manifest it in the days, weeks, months, and years to come. And in this way, we banish any fears we might unconsciously possess that it's the end of the world as we know it, and that life will continue on unabated. My mathematician father taught me at a young age about the theory of induction, which is that just because the sun comes up every single day, as it has throughout the annals of recorded time and history, we can't be sure that it's going to happen tomorrow, but we nevertheless possess an unconscious certainty. We possess an unconscious uncertainty until we actually see it for ourselves. And that's the true nature of Capricorn, that what we see, feel, hear, touch, and taste, we know to be consistent and true throughout all time. Induction is the idea that just because it has happened throughout time immemorial, we really don't know with certainty that it will happen tomorrow. But this in turn feeds into the concept of faith, a Jupiter Sagittarius archetypal energy that allows us to know that it will be part of our inner reality. So we may manifest our long-term existence as part of our external reality. I'm hoping you're getting what I'm saying, because I feel I'm stumbling over my words. But induction says that just because the sun came up every day for millions of years doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow. And that creates an unconscious uncertainty. And we assuage that unconscious uncertainty by developing a true sense of inner faith that the sun will come up tomorrow and that thoughts become reality, and therefore we'll make it happen. And that brings us back to the importance of remaining grounded in the short term through this Gemini full moon lunation, which may cause confusion and uncertainty about our true beliefs. While these beliefs may need tweaking, because the Gemini moon asks the Sagittarius sun to let in more light as we approach the darkest day of the year, we still may possess an unshakable sense that the sun will come up tomorrow, as the character Annie optimistically sings about. And since Mercury squares Chiron at this lunation, we're also called to contemplate better ways, as Chiron, we're on the doorstep of Chiron turning direct, to express our soul's past and current pain, what caused that wounding, and how we may now express it openly by facing the tension of the square to rise to the occasion by making the Capricorn commitment to knowing in our souls, in deepest sense of inner security, that the light, while it may change, will never actually die. Think of all the candles and lighted decorations so many of us delight in seeing this time of year, and recognize the symbology of that. So as the sun's rays grow shorter this time of year, such lights, candle lighting ceremonies, Christmas trees, Hanukkah candles. Hanukkah was early this year, true, but that such lights in the external world are confirmation of the belief that while the light will dim, it will never be extinguished, because it lives on inside of us all. And since the light resides within the heart, and the heart is part of us we call home, we are all looking into the deepest recesses of our heart as all these astrological energies are hitting us now. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've all found the information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution in this lifetime. Be sure to join me next week, December 23rd, for another episode of Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking. Until then, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. And happy holidays to everyone, everywhere, regardless of what holidays you celebrate, where you hail from, etc., etc. And may you all enjoy the dimming of the light with the conscious knowledge that it will return because it can never be extinguished within. Namaste.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free